BB851, turn right, heading 180. Order 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established 27.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you very much for deciding to spend the limited time you potentially have away from your family watching this video today. It's greatly appreciated. The Airbus A380 is nearing its end in regards to production, and I thought why not focus on its eventual removal from the aviation scene, specifically within Europe as the industry quietens down for the holiday period. The Airbus A380, to begin with, was never one that was featured heavily within Europe. You could argue its biggest market, or home, was over in the Middle East, with carriers like that of Etihad, Qatar, and of course none other than the largest operator, Emirates. Within Europe, the A380 was featured with British Airways, formerly Air France, and of course Lufthansa. However, plans for the aircraft with these airlines has significantly changed in the past year. Starting off in Germany with Lufthansa. We've learned over recent months that the airline will be retiring a number of its Airbus A380s, and then also a month prior, in November, it announced that the remaining 8 units it still had within its operations wouldn't be staying in service, and instead would be flown to long-term storage, as they at this point in time currently out of the question. Lufthansa is quoted as saying the aircraft is specifically out of its medium-term plans. What this means is something I'll now dive into. When an airline puts aircraft in long-term storage, it can honestly mean a number of things. However, the main question that often arises is whether or not it'll return from long-term storage. Typically, that answer is more often than not yes. However, given the changing aviation industry and the current climate worldwide, it isn't exactly set in stone whether these 8 units with Lufthansa will ever be returned to operations, especially if Lufthansa does not see the need for them and moves past them, potentially utilising the A350, which as we know is more fuel efficient. They also have Boeing 787s that are set to be welcomed on into their operations in the coming years. Lufthansa already announced major changes to its fleet through a statement earlier, noting based on current fleet planning and the resolutions taken by the management boards, the assumption is that 5 Boeing 747s, 8 Airbus A380s, 17 Airbus A340s, and 11 Airbus A320s, 5 owned Airbus A319s, and then we finally have 10 leased A319s at Lufthansa would be removed. And with only 8 of those A380s left, they may simply utilise other aircraft moving forward, something I briefly touched on before. As we know, moving across to Air France, they said goodbye to all their remaining A380s towards the middle part of this calendar year. Their retirement was an immediate one, which meant given the current ongoing pandemic, the French public did not exactly get the chance to properly say farewell to the world's largest passenger plane. For Air France, their A380s had been relatively dated. However, the airline did have plans to work on that, with originally changes coming in the form of some A380s being retired, and then some seeing their cabin refitted to better compete with other customers, and give people once again a reason to fly on the Air France A380. However, it was going to be a hefty cost to begin with, but the airline deemed it was worth the time and effort moving forward. This was before, though, the pandemic hit. After the pandemic arrived, the airline deemed it was not worth the costs and the drop-off in demand, with the likelihood that travel would not return to the 2019 levels for many, many years. After not that long operating the type, they would eventually pull the plug on it. Finally, there's British Airways within the UK, who have been on the back end of many rumours throughout the years, like covered here on the channel, that have indicated they were on the lookout for a second-hand Airbus A380. As we know, there's only ever been one second-hand A380 used for operations, and that was with High Fly. I say was because if you weren't aware, the charter operator did indeed in the last 2 weeks announce it had retired the type after a short 2.5-year spell operating it, not only for charter operations, but most recently for cargo flights transporting critical and medical goods worldwide. The second-hand market, though, for the A380 is essentially non-existent, and I don't think it will ever be existent to begin with. British Airways has, in multiple interviews, reaffirmed its stance on the A380, and that is that the aircraft is a valuable part of its fleet and they have no intention on retiring it anytime soon. If anything, the recent retirement of the Boeing 747 series that came almost 4 years earlier than first expected was how the airline coped with the pandemic and crisis. Ultimately, for the A380, it is coming to an end, not only in a production sense, as the aircraft manufacturer delivers the final few to Emirates, but also throughout the world, with carriers either retiring the type fully, sending them to long-term storage, or removing a significant amount of its units, Within Europe, though, despite the retirement from Air France, the type is still planned to operate with British Airways well into the future. A second lockdown, mostly within the UK, has prevented it from properly returning to operations, but the airline does still plan on operating it long into the future. I'm also sure that Lufthansa would like to welcome the aircraft back into the skies eventually as part of its long-term plan, however that still remains to be seen. And as of course we know, for Air France, they have already completely removed the type. Finally, a brief mention with High Flight, they've also said goodbye to the Airbus A380. That will now likely go for scrapping of crucial parts and goods, or to simply sit in the desert. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the Airbus A380 within Europe? Let me know down below. Thank you very much for the continued support. Please do take care, stay safe, and I'm wishing you a very, very happy new year, and hope for all of us 2021 can be much better, and also for the aviation industry.